Hallo zusammen. Today I, a German native speaker, will be reacting to the infamous Tavern gunfight scene of Inglourious Basterds. And it's gonna be my second time after having watched this for the first time when the movie came out in 2009, like 14-ish years ago. Which is crazy in its own right. I'm gonna be watching and analyzing this scene from a linguistic point of view, so without further ado, let's get into it. To give you a little bit of background on why this is such an important scene in the movie, and for die Operation Kino, the Operation Cinema, which is basically a plot to kill Nazi generals, higher people in the Nazi ranks, and the Bastards, the anti-Nazi coalition, if you will, teamed up with Bridget von Hammersmark. She's a German actress and she's well known in Nazi Germany, but too bad she's also a UK spy. Archie Hicox, who is portrayed by Michael Fassbender, Michael Fassbender, he also teamed up with the Bastards and allies because he's also from the UK. Bridget von Hammersmark and Archie Hicox are here with two bastards. They want to talk how to go forward with the plan, and details and everything. And they chose this tavern in France, near Paris. What they didn't know, though, is that this was already occupied, this pub, this tavern, by German Nazi soldiers because they wanted to celebrate the birth of one of the soldiers' sons. That's why they are there. However, at one point, they are joined by the German Major Hellstrom, who is portrayed by August Diehl, who wants to chat with them. With that being said, let's watch the scene and talk about it.
Ich möchte nicht unhöflich sein, aber wir vier sind sehr gute Freunde.
Michael Fassbender, of course, isn't a native German speaker, even though he has native German ancestors, native German family. Partially. He's from Ireland. And even though he's kind of familiar with the language, you notice that he isn't a native speaker. In this certain phrase right here, he's pretty much spot on, but there are little details, especially when it comes to the pronunciation of suffixes, meaning the ends of words, for instance.
Wir vier sind sehr gute Freunde.
The end of Freunde. Usually Germans would say Freunde, like more like an which is, by the way, called a Schwa-sound. The Schwa at the end of words, which is a really weak and short vowel.
Wir vier sind sehr gute Freunde.
Gute Freunde. Usually Germans might say gute Freunde. And sometimes it's really little things, including the length of vowels when you verbalize a term. In this case, it's Aber. So let's rewatch that real quick.
Ich möchte nicht unhöflich sein, aber...
Aber. That sort of reminds me of a French type of pronunciation of German words. It's the short A at the beginning, aber. It's aber. It's almost always a longer A.
Ich möchte nicht unhöflich sein, aber wir vier sind sehr gute Freunde.
However, everything else basically really spot on. You could argue that Germans these days, at least, would rather say mich instead of nicht. They wouldn't really pronounce the T, they would rather drop it. But you can still say, of course, nicht. That's totally legit and totally happening in daily spoken German as well.
Ich möchte nicht unhöflich sein.
For instance, I sometimes say nicht and other times I say nicht.
Und wir haben uns lange nicht gesehen.
Same here. Und wir haben uns lange nicht gesehen. But then again, that is nothing that would give anything away. By far.
Und wir haben uns lange nicht gesehen.
What I think he does really well here is the pronunciation of German suffixes, which is very specific in spoken German, especially when it comes to the suffix en. In this case, for instance, it's in Haben, Gesehen. Those two terms. You wouldn't say haben or getroffen. You wouldn't really pronounce that e that strongly in that suffix. You would rather say haben. You would basically drop the E entirely. Same goes for gesehen. It's not gesehen, it's gesehen. That is a little detail that could give something away.
Wir vier sind sehr gute Freunde.
Another really tiny detail, but maybe worth mentioning, is that very often when it comes to the S in spoken German, it's rather soft. It's not that sharp all the time. Sometimes, in SCH, in that phoneme, sh, that is sharp, for instance, or in the SZ, the sharp S, that is arguably sharp. But most of the time, when you have words that start in a single S and not SCH, for instance, in this case, sehr, it's a rather soft S. Also, once again, just a little detail, of course.
Das sind sehr gute Freunde.
Sehr.
Also Sturmbannführer, ich fürchte, sie stören.
Once again, there with stören. Maybe it's the combination of the R, the German R, with the suffix en, which I mentioned before, stören. I think that combination in specific,
Ich fürchte, sie stören.
that sounds a little bit off. But other than that, it's pretty legit.
Also Sturmbannführer, ich fürchte, sie stören.
What he also does really well, and I think I noticed that in the previous video that I reacted to, the previous scene, there are two major types of sounds in German. It's the light the hissing sound, which is accompanied by lighter vowels. Ich, for instance, you know, the personal pronoun, first person personal pronoun. Ich, I. It's not ich, but it's ich. But in other German terms featuring rather darker German vowels, for instance the A, it's almost always a more throaty type of sound. For instance in machen. He does a really good job at that. So that is something that he really nails.
Ich bitte um Nachsicht, Hauptsturmführer. Aber nur, wenn das Fräulein hier meine Gegenwart als Störung empfindet.
One thing maybe that's interesting to note here is that the term das Fräulein is a very outdated German term these days. Germans wouldn't use that anymore. The term das Fräulein is a minimized noun, a form of die Frau, singular, die Frauen, plural. The woman, we wouldn't use that term anymore these days, but back in the day, that was pretty common.
Aber nur, wenn das Fräulein hier meine Gegenwart als Störung empfindet, bin ich auch ein Störenfried.
Also another pretty cool German term, which doesn't really get used anymore, I don't think. Der Störenfried. It really sounds like an older German term. Different times, different states of a language. And this goes to show that as well.
Aber nur, wenn das Fräulein hier meine
And by the way, you
Gegenwart
would
als Störung
write
empfindet.
Fräulein with a capital F,
Bin ich auch ein
because it's a noun.
Hier ist es, Fräulein von Hammersmark, störe ich Sie?
Nein.
Das habe ich mir nämlich gedacht. Der Hauptsturmführer scheint einfach nur immun gegen meinen Charme zu sein.
I think this is, you know, slightly getting a little bit awkward, but it's the staring jewel, das Starren, the staring, which really, really is a big part of this whole scene, I think. And many scenes of the movie, it's die Körpersprache, the body language, and die Mimik, the mimics, which really, really, really are important in this movie. And of course, die Gestik, the gestures, especially in this scene. But more about that in a moment. Yeah, he was just joking. Of course he was.
Das war ein Scherz. Scherz. Nein, natürlich störe ich. Natürlich störe ich. Meine Herrschaften, gestatten Sie, dass ich Ihnen nachschenke und dann werde ich Ihnen und dem Fräulein Adieu sagen. Erik hat eine Flasche 33 Jahre alten Whisky aus dem schottischen Hochland. Was sagen Sie, meine Herrschaften?
Das ist sehr freundlich, Sturmbannführer.
Erik!
Once again, das ist sehr freundlich. Like slightly sharp S.
Das ist sehr freundlich.
And also here, really typical with the suffix er. It's usually pronounced like an A sound. It's not Führer, it's Sturmbannführer. That is a typical thing in spoken German.
Sturmbannführer.
It's in the middle between er, Führer, and Führer. Führer.
Der 33er! Und frische Gläser! Wir wollen ja nicht, dass Sie den 33er hier mit Ihrem Gesöfter verseuchen.
Wie viele Gläser?
5. Für mich nicht.
A very, very colloquial German term, das Gesöff.
Gesöff.
I don't know if you can relate to that, but maybe in your native language, I don't know what that is. But in German, in my case, sometimes simply saying certain words, it sounds cool. It sounds pleasant to the ear. Gesöff, for instance, with a short Ö. And by the way, typical for the German language, the double consonant indicates that the vowel coming before it is short.
Gesöff.
It's not das Gesöff, but it's das Gesöff because of the 2F.
5. Für mich nicht. Ich mag Scotch, Scotch mag mich nicht.
Ich auch nicht, ich bleib beim Shampoos.
3 Gläser.
Erik!
And this is the crucial moment. This hand gesture gives it away. That is the end of his cover. There's one major reason for that, because you wouldn't do that in German. There's no exception, basically. You would always start counting with the thumb. Der Daumen. So that's the first finger and not this one. This is the last. So it's 1, 2, 3. Typical German way of showing the number 3. 4, 5. So yeah. I love that scene. And also the subtleties in their acting. It's the nonverbal things that accompany what is being said, or in this case, what's not being said. Sometimes leaving spaces in between also says a lot. Right there, like smiling, yeah. This is gonna be bad situation, but I have the upper hand. Das Lächeln.
Yeah.
And dieser Blick, that look. And also there, the exhaling, das Ausatmen, and the Kiefer once again. And she knows it as well. Yeah, they all know it.
Wovon er was mag?
Auf ein 1000-jähriges deutsches Reich.
Ein 1000-jähriges Reich!
This is interesting. He tries to save it, pronouncing every single vowel and consonant in that phrase. He knows that there's not much you can do anymore. It's just not possible. And they all know it. I think, the looks and everything, the behavior.
Ich muss sagen, ich habe genug von dem Affentheater.
Also another great German term, which, by the way, as opposed to other terms that I've mentioned that don't get used anymore, das Affentheater still gets used to this day. It's the monkey theater. It's an interesting term, Once again, it's a compound word, which is the most common way of coming up with words in German. New words, that is. Even though it may just be for one situation and then it's never said again, but it will serve that purpose in that situation and you can come up with that word, with that compound word on the fly. Das Affentheater has become a really, really fixed German compound word for der Affe, singular, die Affen, plural, and das Theater, singular, die Theater, plural. And arguably, it may be the most fitting term he could have said in this situation, because from his point of view, the spies, whatever you want to call them, the allies are apes, monkeys. They are really below being human. Das Theater not only refers to the theater, like the building, but it also refers to the acting, the act that they put on.
Haben Sie das gehört? Das ist das Geräusch meiner Walter, die direkt auf ihre Hoden gerichtet ist.
Der Hoden, singular. Die Hoden, plural. The testicles. Yeah, that can be very schmerzhaft. I can picture that.
Ja. Warum richten Sie Ihre Walter auf meine Hoden?
Weil Sie sich eben verraten haben. Hauptsturmführer. Sie sind so deutsch wie dieser Scotch.
Also
Herr
Sturmbannführer.
Major.
Schnauze, du Schlampe.
That was, yeah. Also, perfect example of what I just said earlier. The SCH phoneme, sh. And by saying that, Dieter Hellstrom also gives away that he is very certain that Bridget von Hammersmark also is sort of an ally or a spy and not acting in the Nazi German interest.
Sie wollten was sagen.
So keeping the Z?
Ich wollte sagen, dann sind wir zu zweit. Ich habe eine Pistole auf Ihre Eier gerichtet, seit Sie hier sitzen.
Once again, in this case, slightly off with the gerichtet. It's too throaty in there.
Ich habe eine Pistole auf Ihre Eier gerichtet, seit Sie hier sitzen.
It's the E, the light vowel, with the combination CH, so it should rather be gerichtet, not gerichtet. Now it doesn't matter anymore, of course, but still saying, you know.
Und ab jetzt sind wir zu dritt. Und auf die Entfernung bin ich ein richtiger Frederik Zoller.
Scheint mir ein bisschen heikel zu sein, unsere Lage. Was jetzt passieren wird, Sturmbannführer.
I don't know if he did that intentionally or if that was part of the script necessarily. Maybe just came out of his mouth that way.
Was jetzt passieren wird.
Weird.
I must say. Damn good stuff, sir. Now, about this pickle we find ourselves in. It would appear there's only one thing left for you to do.
And what would that be?
Stiglitz.
Say auf Wiedersehen to your Nazi boss.
Oh boy, I love it. Maybe, I guess for Til Schweiger, his most favorite line he ever said in a movie of his, you know. And this, last but not least, leads me to speaking about the expression auf Wiedersehen, which means see you again. You know, it's one of the phrases, one of the goodbye phrases in German. Very common. See you again. Expecting to see you again, which is implied there, sort of. And sometimes, you know, or often, you say that to people that you see every few days, for instance, co-workers, family members, friends, you name them. However, sometimes you also say auf Wiedersehen in situations in which you could know that, theoretically speaking, you won't see that person again. You may still say that, auf Wiedersehen. However, you won't see his balls again, I'm afraid. Subscribe, like, and share the video if you enjoyed this, and if you learned something, you may also want to check out the other Inglourious Basterds video that I did a couple of months ago, and maybe even more Learn German with series, Learn German with music, Learn German with movies, Learn German with games types of videos on my channel. Over 700 videos waiting for you here. It's much fun, and I'm really, really grateful for your support, of course. Be it on patreon.com/definitely, by sharing, and by doing all the YouTube things, of course. All of that is greatly, greatly appreciated. So, definitely see you next time. Tschüss und bis zum nächsten Mal. Thanks for being here.